Bravehearts New Zealand was set up to educate, advocate, support and counsel whānau who are affected by a loved one's addiction. I think, as you said before, we had 3 years ago, after a long, painful journey with my meth-addicted son, I moved here to Tauranga and I met another lady, Roz, who had also been on a similar journey, but had been helped by a local policeman, Lindsay Red Smith. So we decided to start up a group for other parents and enlisted Red's support in organising a meeting. So we had 60 people turn up to that first meeting in June 2016, and it was obvious that people were crying out for help.
So was it just coincidence that you moved to Tauranga and met this woman who sort of initiated this public education meeting, or was it, was this part of the plan?
No, it wasn't part of a plan at all. It just happened. I had a very long and painful journey with my own meth-addicted son in Auckland, and I moved here 3 years ago for peace, and I certainly didn't intend to set up a registered charity at that stage.
So did your son move with you, or was this something of an escape by yourself?
It was an escape by myself.
So how much would you like to say about what it's like seeing a loved one become addicted to meth, and I guess the lack of control that you have over that process?
Well, I can't speak for other members of my own family, but for me, it was a complete shock and denial. I'd grown up in the 60s. I was familiar with alcoholism. I'd heard of cannabis, LSD and cocaine, but I had no knowledge of methamphetamine at all. I had a beautiful boy who was turning into a teenage monster. We thought maybe it's hormones or depression. He failed at school. He couldn't hold down a job. He went to live with his dad for a while. We tried doctors, counsellors, anger management, sent him off to Outward Bound to do an Outward Bound course. But no one ever suggested drugs, addiction as a possibility. At 19, he himself was desperately seeking help and finally admitted his addiction to us. And at that stage, I had no idea what pea, meth, ice or crystal was. So the next 10 years became a roller coaster.
Does it surprise you that, given, the help that you tried to get, the fact that he'd gone to Outward Bound, that nobody detected what the issue was?
I was surprised, but we are going back a number of years now, Sheldon. I think it probably would be obvious now, but not so much then. So
P didn't have the sort of... It was a bit more underground, I suppose, in those days. What are we talking, the late 90s or earlier?
We're talking about 17, 18 years ago.
Right. So sort of the turn of the century.
So, yeah,
sort of.
Early 2000s.
Right. I mean, you describe your son at that time as a monster. What sort of treatment did you get from him?
Threatening behaviour. There was threatening suicide. There was violence, aggression, financially, because he couldn't hold down a job. He was always needing money. He stole. He ended up getting in trouble with police.
Did you support him financially and perhaps be ignorant of the fact that you were probably fueling an addiction?
Very ignorant of the fact, but even after I knew the fact, it was still very hard not to enable. And, I still hear it from families now, but, like my son, my daughter has threatened to commit suicide if I don't give them this or do that. So
that's how
a lot of people just do it. They enable.
The impact...
Because they're afraid of the consequences if they don't.
So there's a lot of bribery and bullying and intimidation, it sounds?
Yes. A lot of fear and aggression for family members. But at the same time, now that we know a lot more about it, we recognise that this is a health issue that our loved one has. And, we have to be guided by experts that the best thing to do is to not enable. But it's still very hard. You know in your head what you should be doing, but your heart is telling you something very different.
Well, I guess there's been some positive moves by the government in the last couple of weeks to throw more money at the pea and synthetic cannabis issue, and I guess to harden up on the punishments and to enable police to do more. But firstly, what was the impact on your emotional health?
Oh, well, I absolutely struggled with not knowing what to do. And in terms of my own mental health, I tried antidepressant medication as a way to help me cope, but that just left me feeling numb, and I couldn't laugh or cry, and I needed to be able to feel. My older son was overseas for a lot of time, but when he came back, he also suffered as a result of his brother's addiction and couldn't cope with the state that his brother was in or the state that his mother was in. I left my job, I had of 12 years in 2007, to get away from Auckland and spent a year in Hawke's Bay. However, I missed family and friends, and it was a long drive back to Auckland. But when I returned in 2008, I had no employment. I struggled with a lack of confidence trying to get back into the workforce and with extreme anxiety.
So do you think there was ever any recognition of the effect, the impact on you and the brother? I mean, if we make it less personal, do you think addicts generally have any regard for the impact that they're having on their loved ones?
It wasn't just us. There was a whole extended family as well. And yes, I believe deep down they know that the pull of the drug is, suddenly becomes far more important to them than their own family. And in some cases where they have children of their own, they walk away from their own children. This is the evil of this particular drug and other drugs and alcohol, is that people can turn away from their own families, from the people who love them the most. The drug becomes their choice.
Yeah, well, just by coincidence, I'm reading a fictional crime thriller, and there's a drug addict as a main character, and it sort of reports that it's the rush of the drugs which is the only thing that the addict has to look forward to.
Yes, it becomes their focus,
and
the exclusion of all else. unfortunately.
And funding that, I mean, I've always been baffled by how people are able to fund it, because it's not a cheap recreational drug, is it, P?
It's a lot more affordable now, or meth is. It's a lot more affordable than it used to be, but it's still, people end up engaged in criminal activities to support their habit.
So it's a double whammy, really, isn't it? It's not only an impact on the addict, but on the community as well. I mean,
yes.
Do you hold any parties who may have, enabled your son to become an addict? Do you hold any parties responsible for what has happened?
I think society. Initially, you blame yourself, but with the help of a really good counsellor that I saw in Auckland, she helped me to see that it wasn't my fault. It wasn't his father's fault. It's society and the education system. Maybe we need to do more to prepare our children for a life that is not easy, and teach them to care not only for others but also for themselves. How to look after themselves if they do have issues things that hurt them, and this is where a lot of them that succumb to these drugs, because it takes away the pain. And I think, they need to be able to have ways of coping with this pain, and it needs to be taught at a very young age.
And do you think there's any indication that they're getting the sort of coping strategies and tactics and that sort of thing that are needed to get them through these tougher times?
There are some initiatives now going into schools. There's Kiwi Kids. There are organisations or some schools that have meditation workshops for the children, teaching them how to breathe and just how to control their emotions.
And mindfulness. I think mindfulness is quite strong.
Yes, sorry, I was looking for the word. Yes, well, mindfulness.
Yeah, a colleague of mine who's a psychologist, she does some mindfulness classes at Rangitoto College, I think, which is part of Anxiety New Zealand's work, I think.
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
And I'm host Sheldon Brown with technician Declan Curran, and today we are talking to the founder and executive director of Brave Hearts New Zealand, Erin Scarlett ONeill. She's speaking to us by phone from Tauranga. Here you've painted a fairly graphic picture of some of the challenges that you faced personally. Did you imagine by moving to Tauranga that you were going to get heavily involved in a support charity, a public education charity to help support people who are caring for addicts? No,
I didn't plan it at all. It evolved, it happened, and I think, as I said before, I met another mum, and with the help of a local policeman, we organised a meeting and had 60 people turn up. So from there, I thought, so many people are suffering. I knew a lot of people myself in Auckland who were suffering, and a lot of us don't talk about it. There's a stigma around it. I mean, I certainly didn't tell a lot of people until a few years ago what had actually gone on in my family. So I think that it suddenly became apparent to me that there was a need for people to be educated and to be supported around this issue. And we, a few months after that first meeting. We continued to hold regular support group meetings, but a few months after that, we had some funding from the Tauranga Council and held a public seminar, and we had over 270 people turn up to that. We had a venue for 250 that we wondered whether we would fill.
Right.
And they were filling out the doors.
How did you promote that? Well, what was the sort of theme or focus of that meeting that attracted so many people?
We called it P, an awareness seminar.
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
And I'm host Sheldon Brown with technician Declan Curran, and this is our last live broadcast for 2018. Thank you to all our listeners and supporters and people that have uploaded or downloaded the program on Planet Audio. But today we're talking to the founder and executive director of Bravehearts New Zealand, Erin Scarlett ONeill. And Erin, let's try and get this on a more positive side, because there is very much a positive story to be told here. Things have turned around for your family member.
Yes, absolutely turned around. Over the whole time, he was always trying to come back. And as the years went on, his clean times became longer and the using times became less. And he has now been in recovery for 3.5 years. We feel as though we have our beautiful boy back. He's studying for a Bachelor of Youth Development and is working with a wonderful organisation in South Auckland and helping other people to get well as part of a wellness program. And we're so proud of him, and just it was a long journey for him also, and for him to now be helping others, I think that's it's what we call turning something painful into something positive.
I was just going to jump in there and say, yeah, I can relate to that totally. When I've come out of the bipolar and now being privileged to be part of Mental Health Radio with Sheldon, being able to give something back and not necessarily walking the same road, but having an understanding of where that person has likely been. I think that's powerful, and powerful for him to be able to impart where he's been with others. I think that's really commendable.
Yes. He once said to me many years ago, when I come out of this, I'm going to help the kids and you can help the parents. But I never thought it would become a reality.
Isn't it one of the gains that occurs from pain that we go through, that I think we become more aware of others, we're more inclined to think of others and get away from being self-obsessed and self-absorbed. And you know, Erin, there's quite a coincidence here that I spoke to you about, and that your son contacted me about the latest Framework Touch tournament and wanted to put a team in from the community health organisation that he is working for in South Auckland. Yes. And I put two and two together and realised that this was your son, and I was very impressed with his attitude in calling me, and we were going to get together, and I hope we might do that in the new year because he's doing some very relevant things in healthy living and healthy lifestyles that I'd like to talk about on the air. But in your comments about, you know, how the using became less, the periods between using became longer, it sounds as though you were bought in and there was more openness in this recovery. Did that happen?
Not really, no. No, I feel that I'm only just recently in the past few years have I really begun to understand what it was like for him. I think at the time I was so caught up in what it was doing to me and to others in the family. And I regret that. A lot of the people who are working in organisations now are people who have are addicts in recovery who have done the journey themselves. Not all, but a lot of them are, and they have so much to give.
Well, it's what we call lived experience in mental health.
That's the one, yeah.
And I think that's an invaluable asset to help others that are just starting on their journey.
Okay, they can go to our website and have a look.
And the address there is?
www.bravehearts.nz.
So it's www.bravehearts with an S on the end.
With an S.
Yeah, .nz. Right.
Yes.
So all the public meetings are listed there. Have you got any coming up before the start of the new year?
No, we finished last Thursday evening in West Auckland, so that's it now for the year. But the phone is still available if you want to speak to someone. And I just want to say to people that if you do phone, you're going to speak to someone, either myself or Roz or someone else who has been through what you're going through. We're not a telephone answering service. We know what you're talking about. We can empathise with you. We can give you some tools. We also have our Bravehearts educator who will do a one-on-one with people. And
so you can refer them?
3-hour session. But that's only available in Tauranga at the moment.
Oh, so that's a face-to-face session with an educator?
With an educator and for the whole family.
Right. Is there any costs associated with that? No
costs at this stage, no. And we'd love to expand that too throughout New Zealand. But I'd also like to mention our Facebook page. We have a page that you can go on and read helpful articles and news. But we also have a closed group page, and people are supporting each other on that closed group page, people throughout New Zealand who don't have access to our support group meetings. So if people want to have a look on Facebook, Bravehearts NZ, one is our news page, education page, and the other one is the closed group. Back to